Hello and happy Monday. Purse Strings is back again for another Money Monday. I'm very excited for this one. We'll be talking about second marriages and money, which is a hot conversation. Before we get started, Purse Strings is here every week. We are here to provide financial education, tips, tricks, pieces of advice. And then when you need a professional to go put things in transition or transaction, we have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to serve you. They love to serve the female market. We call those our professionals. We call those professionals our Purse Strings approved professionals. And Donna Kendrick is one of them. I know, Donna, you specialize you have the CDFA, which is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Do you have another certificate too about divorce?
Yeah, I am also a CFA, or I'm sorry, CFP. So I'm a Certified Financial Planner.
Planner.
Yep.
Not everyone always knows about the CDFA, but I always like to bring that up, that it is, something that makes you unique and specializing in divorce. And so I'm going to let you then introduce yourself with a little bit more information.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. So I am Donna Kendrick, and I specialize my practice with advice for families in transition. And so what is a family transition? That's usually someone who is in widowhood, divorce, which is where that CDFA comes from, and also blended families. So the opportunity to speak to everyone about how to really take the right steps in blending your families is awesome. I was a widow in 2013 with young children, ages 8, 12, and 13, and 9 years later got remarried. So I literally just passed 2 months in my new remarriage, and now we have 6 kids from ages 12 to 21. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. So I hope I'm speaking to you all as a financial planner, as well as a mom, and then as a spouse moving forward.
Awesome. Well, that was a great introduction. And it is interesting that, there are different situations out there where, there's the gray divorce now where some people, the kids are much older and that's less of a financial thing versus you have young kids versus if you have an ex that's, giving you money or, child support and things like that. So there's a lot of different situations. But we're going to kind of start with, what from your past can haunt you in your future marriage? Because we want this one to go well. So let's get these things out of the way.
Yeah. And that's it. Like more than anything, I encourage everyone who's listening, have that earnest conversation. Sometimes these conversations can be hard because it's, we call it like the coming to Jesus moment. Like you're just like putting it all out there. You're being very frank. And you have to be, because if you're not at that honest point and vulnerable at this starting point, you can't grow moving forward. So one of the very first things we ask everyone to actually disclose is their credit. Right. The best way to do that is, I would say, sit with your financial planner, pull your credit report, and have that financial planner read or lead the discussion. But you can do it at your kitchen table with you and your soon-to-be spouse. You can get your free credit report from annualcreditreport.com. Each year, you're allowed a copy from each of the credit agencies, which is Experian, Equifax, TransUnion. So go ahead, do one. 3 months later, do another. And your soon-to-be spouse should be doing it too. And you're looking for things such as credit scores, outstanding debt, credit lines. Maybe there's some errors on there too that you'd have to get corrected in writing. So you want to take a look at those. And that's the very first part. Be honest. Where's your debt? Where's your credit? And where do we have to make decisions to improve that moving forward? First one.
That's a great first step. Yeah, I know I can just open my bank app and it gives me a good, pretty close number of what it is. And so, yeah, that's a good thing to disclose. It kind of reflects the recent history of a person sometimes.
Yeah, definitely too. And you might get to the point where you're like, okay, now between us, we have 7 credit cards. Do we need those? And if we're going to be looking for a joint loan, is that going to give us too much credit exposure? But I always say sit with your professional and go through that, because your credit score, that FICO score you see on your bank and your credit cards, is a little bit different than the annual credit report, because that's when you're going to go fine tooth comb all the way through it. Right. The second thing to really consider is children from a former marriage. As I said, we're a blended family now, the new Brady Bunch. We got 6, 3 boys, 3 girls. And with that, there's different financial situations to take into consideration. Are you paying alimony? Is there child support? Can they come back to you for more child support or less? And will you be able to afford that as a couple moving forward? Also adult children, right? So my oldest is 21, right? So I want to make sure that in my own estate documents, I've protected the rights of my children, maybe from assets
Right.
left from their own natural born father. So
Right.
those are things that you really should take into consideration, plan for, right? Have caveats for, and be honest moving forward of what that exposure could look like. Yep.
Yeah, and I like how you bring out that, some of that is you do have to think for your oldest kids, that's their fathers. We don't want everything mixed in. You have to make sure everything trickles down to the right route at the end of the day.
Yeah, and to make sure too that the expectations are clear, right? We
Of
both come
course.
to a marriage with X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And what really do we want to leave for all of the children, or is it going to be a shared pot of gold? Who knows?
Right.
Yep, yep.
All right. And then what's the third one?
The third one is always to make sure, it kind of follows along with the child child support moving forward, but also alimony. Could there be future claims on our assets from our ex-spouse? But to take that a step further, as part of the divorce settlement, did you actually have to share part of the pension? And does that take your current spouse out of being able to receive the pension? The same things can work with annuity and life insurance. When many of my clients, my CDFA clients, my certified divorce financial analyst clients come, the first thing I sit down and say, okay, are you officially applying for divorce or not? Yeah. Let's go back in and let's see if the beneficiaries on our life insurance are our ex-spouse, right? And can we change those? As well as beneficiaries on 401ks, IRAs, things like that moving forward. I call it the time to scrub. Bring everything in and let's do that beneficiary review, but also know for some of these guaranteed income streams, are you as the new spouse entitled to them or not? It'll change how you save for retirement.
Yeah, sometimes it is what it is, but then you just have to plan accordingly, which is great to know up front.
It's like just time to sit down and just be open. And really, if you know your starting point, then you can plan for the finish line.
Definitely, definitely. So you really want to talk about your credit score, talk about, your kids and, the money from former relationships. And then, if the ex-spouse can come and, take you back for some more money or, some of that money later will go to them as well.
Yeah. And I always say alimony is settled during the divorce. You cannot waive a child's right to child support. So even though you might have agreed to it, like, oh, we won't claim for child support. Careful. You cannot waive a child's right. They can come back to you later.
Wow. I'm sure you've seen so much.
Oh, yeah. It's all good.
So what can you do to kind of ensure that your future financial relationship then can stay healthy?
Yeah. And this is the positive part that I love talking about. And it starts with the very same first step. Have that open conversation. Sit there. Where are we now? Snapshot where we want to be and how do we get there? Where do we feel financially vulnerable? In my practice, we do something called the financial virtue survey, which is pretty much just takes us from life experience, from growing up with our moms and dads, these last relationships. How do we make our financial decisions? Sit with your financial planner and take that survey. And then we can actually understand the whys behind why sometimes we have a sensitivity around money and how do we talk to one another about that? Yep. It's a good one.
That's a good one. That's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing I always say too is if you have significant assets or it just makes you feel better, get a prenuptial agreement, right? Because that extends also from that conversation. You ask your soon-to-be spouse, what will make you feel more comfortable, right? So it might just be some of these things could already be protected through beneficiary designation, right? And through assets you had legally coming into the marriage, but you might just want to see it summarized on a form. And you can just go to any of your attorneys. Divorce attorneys are actually really good at doing prenups because they've seen things on the back end. So they like to protect on the front end and they're very forthcoming and protect both sides. It's almost like a document of that shared conversation you had the night before. Yeah.
That's a great piece of advice. We are big proponents of, the prenup, just because you just never know. And you just want to make sure everything's covered and documented.
Yeah. And you can also have post-marital agreements too.
Yep.
People don't think you can, but you certainly can moving forward. If that makes you feel better too, if after the first year things feel a little bumpy, you're like, hey, if we just write this down, I think we'll be better on our financial conversation. Okay.
Yeah. Perfect. There's a plan.
Yeah. The other thing to consider too is we all come with our own credit score. That very second step, pulling our credit, our first step, like let's make sure that we understand where our credit score is, what our credit history is. You may want to keep your credit separate because that way you might be able to qualify for loans differently, or there's always you have your own credit score, but if you go on, let's say, a credit card jointly, whatever perhaps missteps with that credit card will affect you both, even though you have a separate credit score. So you might want to keep your credit score separate. But again, that goes back to the conversation, because should you do that, you really won't have a way to gauge if there's been spending activity on the other spouse. I always like to say that annual credit report, you can get 3 a year, right? Do one in the spring, do one in the fall, because that's where you'll see those changes. So if you are keeping your credit separate, pull those annual credit reports for each of you and sit down, have a coffee, have a conversation on Sunday morning with your spouse. Yep.
Seems like it's just we got to have these open and transparent conversations. And that's what is really building it, for sure. But yeah, it's important. I know a lot of women kind of don't always know that they have their own credit score. It doesn't become joint, which can be good or bad.
Again, I had written a book, and in that book, I used an example of my own mom. So she's a stay-at-home mom for years and didn't work. And so when her and my dad separated, she had no credit. She never had a credit card in her own name. She had never had a stream of income. So she spent the first 3 years of being independent actually establishing her own credit. So it's really important. And I like teaching that to our younger generations too, of like, if you're going to have like a Hulu subscription, put it on a Discover card and that's it. Pay it every month. Just start that credit history moving for yourself. It's important.
I love it. I love it.
I think another good point would actually be to make sure that we kind of touched on it too. How are you titling everything, right? So a lot of, once you do get married and you want to share an asset, like let's say a home with your spouse, you want to have it titled joint with right of survivorship. And again, every state is a little bit different, follows their own laws. So always go to a tax professional or a real estate lawyer and have them look at these documents. But if you have something filed jointly, that would actually settle outside of your will. So your will is what you would designate for where you'd like your assets to go. But you can actually settle items outside of your will. And if you have it titled as joint with right of survivorship, that will happen. Same thing with your life insurance policies, annuities, and pensions. So make sure you do that beneficial review. And that could be a very nice way to share assets that might have been independent before without having to do it through your will or through retitling too. So
it's a very good piece of advice. So if someone, like if she owned the house and him and his family moved in, they could just get both of their names on the house now. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Could. Yeah. And I know some situations where the house itself is joint with right of survivorship and the mortgage is just one name, or vice versa. The house stays. Someone else already gave up the property. They're still going to be paying the mortgage. They've used the assets from the one property to purchase something different. So they just want to keep it as a sole asset. And then that would actually settle according to the will if you have just one name on it.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Pay attention. There's lots of caveats in there.
You really do. And that's why, we say it's definitely, time for a professional to come in and have these conversations, because they know these little nuances or different things that sometimes you don't even think about. And then just because you don't know what you don't know. And these professionals can bring some great light onto things that, and so you could be proactive.
Yeah. And so much too is having your estate documents created. And I say that for anyone, just have your will created, protect the interest of any children that might be there, and also clarify your directions. Because let's say you both pass and you have kids from this blended family together, be very clear, right? We always want everyone to feel supported and loved. And sometimes that's the message through your will that comes out later. I hope you've had the conversations with the family beforehand, but the same thing, taking care of your power of attorneys, your healthcare directive. Make sure you update those when you go through and start updating your life insurance policies. And I'm going to jump back to that one too, employer health benefits. So many times we get benefits through our employers and we don't change the beneficiary. Sit with a financial professional and make sure you're going through that. That should be something you do annually too.
Yeah. That's a whole list of people that you don't want to that you want to make sure you update for sure, because it's a huge trickle down effect.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Truly. Going everything from life insurance to IRAs, 401ks, benefits. Yeah. You got to go through it. Pensions.
That's wild.
Yep.
And so let me see what other questions, if we have any coming in. This has already been a lot of great advice to kind of have these conversations. Are there any other things that you want to make sure that we talk about in this that, are top of mind that you want people to know?
Yeah, I think a lot of things too is to understand when you're making if you do a premarital agreement, there might be some conditions in there should either one of the spouses die, but there'll also
Mm,
be conditions if this marriage also dissolves, if you divorce in the marriage, where will things solve differently? And the feeling could be very different on both. And some of that is also listing when you come into the marriage, what debts were held in each one's name. And will you or will you not be responsible for those debts should the
oh,
spouse pass? Something to just understand so you can make those bigger decisions moving forward.
right. That's, yeah, when you accumulate someone else's debt, you don't want to be stuck with that later for some reason,
Yeah, because we have
for
to make
sure.
decisions for our own kids too. Like, will we
Yep.
co-sign a parent loan, like for
Yeah.
all of the kids, or just two, or who will be left with that? Will that be the new spouse's um, liability should the
Yeah.
natural born parent pass? You got to be careful.
Those are great pieces of advice. I know families these days, they are, very different. We're just not that, man, woman with two babies, two kids skipping down the beach anymore. They can be great. They can be big and wonderful. But there are a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different loved ones that you want to make sure are connected into the mix.
Definitely. And so much of it is communication with
Yep.
whoever's the executor to your will, to your children. Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, I think these have been all wonderful pieces of advice before, to make sure, the marriage and what's coming from before, and to make sure that this marriage turns out successful financially and have those conversations and knowing what to look at. I think this is great advice for those who are, getting married again.
Yeah, starting it
Yeah.
all over again. I
Yeah.
just did it, and it's vulnerable. It is, but it's beautiful at the same time.
Well, you look very happy, which, we love to see. And it sounds like a great, time with 6 kids running around. I mean,
They're a ton of fun. They are.
yeah, that's a fun age for sure.
Wouldn't change a
Um,
thing.
well, I appreciate you, Donna, coming on today and providing this information. I think it's a great starting point for many couples when they're going to go into the second marriage. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Donna. I meant for this banner to be going the whole time, but her email is at the bottom now. And she's one of our Purse Strings approved professionals. So you could also reach her at our site, pursestrings.co. So yeah, thank you, Donna, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope it was a little wisdom that people found helpful. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
All right. Bye-bye.